Typical young family. We're sitting in church one Sunday morning, mom and dad and two kids, and all of a sudden the mom just sat straight up like she'd been shot out of a cannon and reached over to her husband's hand and grabbed his hand and said, "We've got to go. We got to get out of here right now and get back to the house. I just remembered that I left the iron on, and I don't want to burn the house down." Her husband never flinched, never moved. He grabbed her hand and held it tightly and said, "Honey, no need to go anywhere. I just remembered I left the upstairs bathtub on. The house is not going to burn down. That's for sure." They both remembered something. I want to talk today about remembering. And the text that Fred read for us is a classic text in the Old Testament about remembering. Especially this weekend, we remember it's Memorial Day weekend, the time Americans are supposed to recall the ultimate sacrifice of brave men and women who laid down their lives to preserve our freedoms. Now, can I say that again? They laid down their lives to preserve our freedoms. Wow. And how many of us get caught in the fun and the play and spend the whole day Monday without giving our fallen heroes even a fleeting thought? In the text Fred read for us in Deuteronomy chapter 8, the word remember occurs twice, and the warning do not forget occurs another 3 times. In fact, the book of Deuteronomy is full of encouragement to do not forget, to remember what God has done. And I don't know if you've ever thought about it this way, but memories are a wonderful blessing from God. Memories are a wonderful invention from God. They allow us to relive our joys and high points and our good times over and over and over again. Isn't that great? It really is. It was Mark Twain who once said, "That which was hard to endure is sweet to remember." And it is. If your house did actually catch on fire because you left the iron on before church, and you had time to fetch only a couple of items as you ran back in, and you know that's the old question that's been asked 100 times, what would you get? And 99 times people's answers are, I would grab the family photo albums, because we cherish that. You have grabbed the video cassettes or the discs that have all of our memories of our families going back through the years, because we cherish pictures that conjure up sweet memories of weddings, births, Little League games, birthday parties, graduations, from home movies to VHS to DVDs and now to streaming. How much have you accumulated over the years? We have the luxury of filming our most precious memories. Can you imagine if the Hebrews in the book of Exodus had had that option? Can you imagine some of the home movies they would have left to go back over that would help them to remember and not forget what we just read? Think of the magnificent footage they could have filmed. Imagine a Hebrew family with a DVD memory book. Somebody suggests, let's get out the disc and look back on all God has done over these last 40 years. Let's eavesdrop in just a minute on the conversation in the family. Little Joseph says, hey, fast forward to the parting of the Red Sea. I always love seeing that, and I especially love seeing God swallow up the Egyptians and their chariots in the water. And Uncle Samuel says, show the clip when Moses struck the rock and water gushed out. That was so cool. And in fact, the water was cool too. And it was the best tasting water we've ever tasted. And Sister Miriam says, all that manna on the ground looks as strange today on the movie as it did in person. We'd actually get up each morning and think God had caused it to snow in the desert. Who could have imagined? And finally, Mama Rachel makes her comment. Put it on freeze frame on that bronze serpent, because snakes were killing us all, but we were told if we looked up to that bronze serpent, it would save our lives. And I looked up, and indeed it did. And I'm alive today because I looked at that bronze serpent, and I'm sure that's going to have some deeper spiritual meaning later down the road that we don't understand quite now. I'm sure if DVDs and home movies and photos existed when Moses wrote Deuteronomy 8, he would have added to the commands that Fred read, pull out your photo albums and watch the videos and remember the wonderful works that God has done in your lives. But here's what I suspect. Even if the Hebrews had videos and photos, they'd still have to make an effort to remember what God had done. In my office, there are hanging a number of pictures of my family down through the years. And I still have to work at savoring them, though I walk by them probably a dozen times every day. I can go weeks, not think of them, not look at them. See, the problem with videos and photos is they can be ignored. Some of you have home movies that go back 20, 30, 40 years ago that you have not looked at in 20, 30, or 40 years. The problem with videos, movies, and even photos is that they can be ignored. We get busy, walk right past them, never think of them. Good memories, healthy reflections, grow out of a right attitude, an attitude that is teachable, humble, trusting, and grateful, not just pictures or videos that are available. See, a discontented person is always preoccupied with what he can get and always forgets what he has been given. That's the difference between contentment and discontentment. A discontent person is always focusing on what he can get and always forgetting what he has already been given. An anxious person is too busy worrying about what might be rather than be thankful for what has already been. A greedy person has no problem taking the gifts while always ignoring the giver. And that's exactly what Moses is addressing here in Deuteronomy chapter 8 in our text. On the day that Moses led the Hebrews out of Egyptian bondage, he said to the people, "This is a day to remember forever, the day you left Egypt, the place of your slavery." But you know what? They didn't. They didn't. Here in Deuteronomy, we're 40 years removed from this command. The years have taken their toll. A lot of water has gone under the bridge, you might say, and after 4 decades, the memories are just not as fresh and vivid as they once were. So here in Deuteronomy chapter 8:11, Moses addresses the second generation and says, "That is the time to be careful. Beware that in your plenty You do not forget the Lord your God and disobey his commands and regulations and decrees that I am giving you today. You know, when you're younger, you take for granted the ability to remember. But when you get a little older, and then a little older, and then you get to me, you realize what a blessing a good memory really is. I heard about a man's letter he wrote to his cousin that I'll just share with you briefly. Just a line to say I'm living, that I'm not among the dead, though I'm getting more forgetful and mixed up in my head. For sometimes I can't remember when I stand at the foot of the stairs if I must go up there for something or if I've just come down from there. And before the fridge, so often my poor mind is filled with doubt. Have I just put the food in there, or have I come to take some out? Certain nights I stand at the foot of the bed and my brain gets really swirly. I don't know if I'm retiring or just getting up a little early. So remember, I do love you and wish that you were here, but I need to stop my writing because the postman's drawing near. So now I stand beside the mailbox with my face so very red. Instead of mailing you this letter, I opened it instead. The older we get, the more our memory fades. Sometimes I forget all those things that were in that letter. But we're told repeatedly in the scripture to remember, remember, remember. This text, remember, remember. This weekend, we're told to remember. It's Memorial Day weekend. And a day we set aside to remember our fallen veterans. And nowhere does this occur more passionately than at the many memorials on our National Mall in Washington, D.C. People will be gathering tomorrow at the World War II Memorial and at the Korean War Memorial, and a ceremony will be held across the river tomorrow at Arlington Cemetery. And all of them will be somber, and yet in the same way beautiful. Memories and remembrances of those who have gone on before us and paid the ultimate price for our freedoms. There will be memorials tomorrow at the Vietnam Wall in Washington, D.C., and at the traveling Vietnam Wall, which has been all over the country. It was here not too long ago at Memorial Gardens, and I went and took one of my sons and just stood there. I've also been to the one in Washington, D.C., and I have walked by and seen the many, many offerings that are left at the wall, and it is a powerful, powerful thing. How many of you have been to the actual Vietnam Wall? Raise your hand. It's a powerful, powerful thing to do. There have been books and picture books also written on the wall, images and offerings from the Vietnam veterans, and letters on the wall that have blessed our lives by remembering what people did for us, along with dog tags and a headband. One man left a letter that read, "To all of you from Echo Company, I leave you my headband which contains my sweat from the war, my dog tag, and a picture of me. Another time, another place. I promise, I will never forget you." You see, there's some sacrifices indeed so valiant that they deserve to be remembered forever. And some of those we will remember tomorrow, but it's also certainly true of Jesus' sacrifice on the cross that we remember every day of every year, and particularly on the first day of every week when we take communion and remember him. Because Jesus was heaven's soldier who offered up his life for us on the battlefield of sin. He took on the worst of enemies, and he won. And he rose again in triumph. And how sad it is when the sin of forgetfulness snuffs out the remembrance of God's goodness and the rekindled fire of devotion that comes with all of those memories. And if memory loss was a danger to the Hebrews, as Deuteronomy 8 emphasizes, it can also be a danger for us unless we maintain the right attitude and watch our heart. That's why I'm glad that we are one of the few churches of any stripe that celebrates communion and remembers communion every single Sunday. We have evidence that the New Testament Christians did that. Acts 20 verse 7 says, on the first day of the week, the disciples came together to break bread. So we not only have a biblical example of that, an evidence of that, but we also have the reality that on the day of worship, every day of worship, not just every now and then, we remember Jesus. We take time out of our service and remember what the Lord did for us. Notice what Moses says then in verses 12 through 14. When you have become full and prosperous and have built fine homes to live in, and when your flocks and herds have become very large and your silver and gold have multiplied along with everything else, be careful. Don't become proud at that time. Here we go again. Don't forget the Lord your God who rescued you from the land of Egypt, from slavery in the land of Egypt. Don't forget. He says it over and over again. Remember God. Don't forget. You see, we forget God's goodness sometimes when we have become full and prosperous, when we have built fine homes to live in. Sometimes we can forget who was behind those blessings. In the downtime, when your back is up against the wall, when circumstances are difficult or complicated, when you're groping for help and seeking help, when your heart is humble, when you're needy, and when you're willing to admit your desperation, it's in those times that your memory peaks and you remember God and you make promises to God. God, I promise if you get me out of this mess, I'll do this or I'll do that. It reminds me of the two shipwrecked sailors. No hope is in sight as they're just drifting in shark-infested waters. And one of the men grows so desperate that he decides to call on God. And he starts to pray, God, I promise if you get us out of here, I'll give up all of my evil ways. I'll give up foul language. I'll give up a taste for booze. I'll give up a love for strange women. If you'll just send. And right at that moment, his sidekick jumps in and interrupts his desperation and says, wait, don't say another word. I think I see a ship. That's us all too often. If we think times are desperate, we're willing to cry out to God. But the minute we think, no, maybe that's not necessary. Maybe me or somebody else can solve my problem. We forget again. It amazes me how folks remember God when they need Him and then quickly forget God when they have become full and prosperous. And the need is no longer apparent. Politically correct historians are stripping from our textbooks any mention of the prominent role played by our Judeo-Christian heritage in the development of our nation and culture. They're abandoning the facts and the truth to rewrite history in a way that serves a certain political agenda. But on a more personal level, we too can be guilty of revisionist history. We can say in our heart, my power, my might, the work of my hand has made me full and prosperous. When in fact, God Almighty is responsible for any and every blessing we'll ever receive or possess. Our pride has a way of getting in our way to see that. And so Moses went on and said, he did all this so that you would never say to yourself, I have achieved this wealth with my own strength and energy. And then there it is again in this text. Remember your God. He is the one who gives you the power to be successful in order to fulfill the covenant He confirmed to your ancestors with an oath. And then, verse 19 says, I assure you of this, if you ever forget the Lord your God and follow other gods, worshiping and bowing down to them, you will certainly be destroyed. Let me just give you a simple rule of life. This is really simple. You might want to jot it down, or you might want to put it as a note in your phone, or you might want to just jot it on your bulletin or your outline today, because this is as true as I'm standing here today. What you love, you remember. You do not have a problem remembering what you really love. You don't. Now, I didn't say what you say you love, you remember. Because sometimes we say we love someone or something, and we really don't. We forget it very quickly. Well, what you really love, you remember. I've had a few adventures in my life that I've all but forgotten. I mean, we used to go to the beach every year when I was a kid and all the way up, and then when I got married and had kids, and at the time it was a big deal. But don't ask me to recall a single detail of any one of those 75 to 100 trips to the beach I have taken through the years. I would not be able to tell you a single detail of it. I played high school football and high school baseball, and I remember that I did it, but don't ask me to remember a single detail of any bit of it. I might get occasionally a glimpse over here or there, maybe one little thing that happened, but don't ask me to remember anything about that. But when it comes to people and activities I love, I've got the memory of an elephant. Some of you say you got the body of an elephant too, but I got the memory of an elephant. I do. The day I asked Diane to marry me, and then the day we got married, September the 9th, 2018, September the 9th, 1977, that's right, isn't it? Whew. I remember that like it was yesterday. The day that my children were born, I remember details about it in 1980 and 1983. I remember it like it was yesterday, and I remember details about that because those are people that I love dearly. Most of you know I'm a big Atlanta Braves fan. I can't remember a Braves game from 2 or 3 nights ago. But I can describe in detail games played by my sons years ago, 20 or 30 years ago, I can remember. In fact, I was helping coach a baseball team at ECS this year, and we were on our way over to play Canterbury, and I called my youngest son, and I said, I'm going to the field. I hadn't been at this field since you had the greatest game you ever had in your life. And he said, what was it? I don't remember it. He didn't remember it. And I said, well, you hit 3 doubles and a home run and drove in 4 runs against Canterbury. And he said, oh, you remember that better than I do. Yeah, because who you love and what you love, you will remember. Alexander Pope puts it this way: how vast a memory has love. Or I've heard it put another way: the art of remembering is the art of taking an interest. It's very difficult to remember something in which you have no real interest. we're inclined to remember those subjects, those things, or those people that have captivated our interest. Do you love the Lord? Don't answer too quickly. Do you love the Lord? What you love, you remember. Let me say that another way. You will never truly forget what you worship. If you really worship something, the word worship means value. If you really worship something, you don't have to worry about forgetting it. You don't have to be reminded over and over again, do not forget, remember this, remember that. I never have to think about it when I come into church on Sunday morning. It never crosses my mind. You remember what you truly worship. So in verse 19, Moses warns the Hebrews, if they forget the true God, they will follow false gods. But I think the reverse is also true. Allow other things to creep in. Let other affections and ambitions crowd God out of the forefront of your attention. Follow stuff rather than God, and it will not take long till you forget Him. You know why? Because human beings are limited in how many different subjects they can focus on at the same time. That's why in the Old Testament, God told His people, remember the Sabbath day and to keep it holy. You're going to have one day every week where you worship me, you rest, you relax, you spend time on your family. You're not going to have distracted or divided attention. You're going to have that day. And that's why then over in the New Testament, He says, on the first day of every week, you are going to come together and you are going to worship me and you are going to take communion to remember me. And that's why. So that you can have a single solitary focus. When you were a Jew in the Old Testament on the Sabbath day, when you're a New Testament Christian on the Lord's Day as you take communion with your brothers and sisters in Christ, your heart lacks the bandwidth for more than one supreme occupation. That's why the Lord said, seek first His kingdom and His righteousness. And all these things will be given to you as well. I hope after today you will take seriously your responsibility to remember. And on this special Memorial Day weekend, I hope that you will remember the sacrifices made for you by fallen soldiers who gave their lives for you so that you can do the very things you are doing right now and that you will do throughout this whole weekend. Enjoy your First Amendment rights. Enjoy your freedom of worship, your freedom of speech, your freedom to assemble, your freedom of the press that others paid for. But I also hope that that won't be the only thing you remember on this weekend. I hope that also on this weekend you will remember the one who paid the ultimate price so that you might not have freedom in a country with your First Amendment rights, but that you will have freedom individually and for an eternity. For if the Son has set you free, you will be free indeed, Jesus said in John 8:36. That's the greatest freedom of all. Above all, remember it and do not forget.